Every year, on the anniversary of my son's disappearance, I set an empty chair at the dining table. It is a ritual born out of longing, a silent testament to the love I have carried for my son, Michael, who went missing during the war 40 years ago. Through the changing seasons and the relentless passage of time, my heart has clung to a single unwavering hope that one day he would return and take his rightful place once more. The world around me has changed. People have come and gone. Yet this ritual remains, a sacred moment of remembrance. Every time I place that chair at the table, I whisper a silent prayer, longing for the day my son would step through the door, his familiar smile lighting up the room, and finally sit where he belongs. Now I am the only one left to observe this tradition. My wife, Margaret, who once sat beside me every year, sharing in this silent tribute, passed away 5 years ago. Without her, the house feels even emptier, the walls echoing with the memories we built together. It is the same house we bought in our early days of marriage, brimming with youthful dreams and the hope of a bright future. But now it stands as a monument to the past, filled with whispers of what once was. Every corner holds a piece of Michael. His childhood photos still adorn the walls, frozen in time, his bright eyes staring back at me. His favourite toys remain tucked away in the attic, untouched, waiting for a child who never returned. The letters he sent from the war are carefully preserved, their edges worn from the countless times I have read and reread them, searching for some hidden message, some final clue that might have given me peace. Each night, as I sit in my chair, the weight of those memories settles heavily upon me, reminding me of all that has been lost, and yet all that still lingers in my heart. I am now 82 years old. My hair has turned white and thin, and my hands are wrinkled with time, bearing the marks of a long life filled with both joy and sorrow. My body is not as strong as it once was, and each movement is slow, deliberate, guided by the careful support of my cane. In the evenings, when the house grows quiet and the weight of solitude settles in, I find myself in my favourite armchair by the fireplace, staring at the empty chair across from me. In my mind, I see Michael sitting there, as if time had never stolen him away. I can almost picture his youthful face, his bright, eager smile. I strain my ears, trying to summon the sound of his laughter, the warmth of his voice calling me Dad once more. But no matter how hard I try, reality remains unchanged. That chair has always remained empty, a silent reminder of all the years spent waiting, hoping, and longing for a miracle. This year, on a cold November evening, I prepared my usual simple meal, soup and bread. The house was silent except for the faint ticking of the clock and the occasional crackle of the fire in the hearth. As I lowered myself into my chair, ready to eat alone as I had for so many years. A sudden knock at the door broke the quiet. I froze, my spoon hovering above the bowl. It was late, too late for visitors. A flicker of unease ran through me. Who could be calling at this hour? My mind raced through possibilities, but none seemed likely. Slowly, I pushed back my chair, grabbed my cane, and made my way to the door. Each step felt heavy, burdened by years of solitude and aching bones. My hand trembled slightly as I turned the knob and pulled the door open. A stranger stood before me, illuminated by the dim porch light, his breath visible in the crisp night air. He was tall, his shoulders broad, but slightly stooped with age. Silver streaks ran through his dark hair, and his face was lined with the marks of time. There was something familiar about him, but I could not immediately place it. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice rasping from years of silence. The man hesitated, his eyes searching mine, as if looking for something. Recognition, perhaps. Then, after a long pause, he finally spoke. "Mr. Carter, my name is James. I think I am your son." He was a tall, elderly man, with silver hair and a face hardened by time. He looked familiar, but I could not recognize him immediately. "Can I help you?" I asked in a trembling voice. He hesitated for a moment, his eyes searching mine with uncertainty. Then softly said, "Mr. Carter, my name is James. I don't know how to say this, but I believe I am your son." My heart skipped a beat, the world around me fading into a blur as I focused on his face. I examined every feature, every crease and shadow, searching desperately for the boy I had lost so many years ago. His eyes, deep, weary, yet familiar, held a sorrow I recognized, a longing that mirrored my own. There was something unmistakable in them, something that whispered of the past, of love, of family. But could it really be him? Could this man standing before me truly be my Michael? "Michael," I whispered. He nodded slowly. "Yes, it's me." It felt as if the ground beneath me had vanished, leaving me weightless and unsteady. A rush of emotions surged through me. Shock, disbelief, hope, each one colliding with the next. My body trembled, my knees threatening to buckle under the weight of the moment. I clutched my cane tightly, desperate for stability. James, or perhaps Michael, quickly stepped forward, his hands firm yet gentle as he caught me, steadying me before I could fall. His touch, so familiar and yet so foreign, sent another wave of emotions crashing over me. Wordlessly, he guided me inside, his presence both comforting and overwhelming. I lowered myself into my chair, my heart pounding wildly in my chest. My mind raced, grasping at memories, searching for proof, for reassurance, for something to anchor me to the reality unfolding before me. I wanted to believe with every fibre of my being, but my heart, weathered by years of loss and longing, struggled to accept what seemed impossible. Could this really be my son? Was the moment I had prayed for finally here? How is this possible? I asked in a shaky voice. We lost you. You never contacted us. Michael clasped his fingers together, his eyes dropping to the floor as if the weight of his past was too heavy to bear. His voice trembled slightly as he began. I was captured during the war, Dad. The enemy took me as a prisoner, and I spent years in a camp, years of darkness, of suffering, of feeling like I would never see home again. When I was finally freed, I was not the same man. I was broken, lost in a world that no longer felt like mine. I didn't know how to come back. I thought you and Mom would have moved on, that you had accepted my loss and made peace with it. I was ashamed of what I had become, afraid of facing you after all this time. So I convinced myself that staying away was the only option, even though deep down, all I ever wanted was to come home. My eyes filled with tears, blurring my vision as a deep ache settled in my chest. We never forgot you, son. Not for a single day. Your mother carried the hope of your return in her heart until her very last breath. Every night she would sit by the window, gazing out into the darkness, convinced that one day she would see you walking up the path. She never stopped believing in you, never let go of the hope that you would find your way back home. If only she were here now. If only she could see this moment. Michael's face twisted with grief, and he looked down. I'm sorry, Dad. I should have come back sooner, but I didn't have the courage. I gently took his hand, feeling the roughness of his skin, hardened by time and struggle, just like my own. You're here now. That's all that matters. That night, for the first time in 40 years, the empty chair at the table was no longer a symbol of loss, but of reunion. Instead of setting it aside as I had done for so many years, I placed a plate in front of my son, my hands trembling with emotion as I served him a warm meal. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows on the walls as we sat across from one another, the weight of time pressing upon us. We talked late into the night, words spilling forth like a flood held back for too long. Michael shared his story in vivid detail, the unimaginable hardships he had endured, the friends he had lost along the way, the dreams that had been shattered and left to wither in the depths of despair. His voice carried the weight of those years, the pain, the guilt, the longing. And I listened, my heart breaking with each word, yet, in some unexplainable way, healing at the same time. In that moment, the past and present intertwined, and for the first time in decades, I felt whole again. In the days that followed, Michael settled into life with me, as if time itself had not carved an unbridgeable gap between us. He moved through the house with a quiet determination, fixing things that had long been left in disrepair. He mended the leaky roof, reinforced the rickety porch steps, and even repaired the old clock on the mantel that had stopped ticking years ago. Outside, he planted flowers in the garden, bright, hopeful blossoms that swayed gently in the breeze, a stark contrast to the years of sorrow that had settled in this place. As I watched him work, my heart swelled with pride, but a lingering sadness remained. I could not shake the thought that Margaret should have been here to see this, to witness the miracle of our son's return. She would have fussed over him, cooked his favourite meals, and held him close as if to make up for all the lost time. The absence of her presence was a hollow ache, but for the first time in years, our home felt alive again, filled with the warmth and love we had once known. One evening, as we sat by the fire, Michael turned to me and said, "Dad, I want to make up for lost time. I want to be the son you always hoped I would be." I smiled, my eyes glistening with tears. "You already are, son. You always have been." The chair that had stood as a silent witness to my grief, unoccupied for decades, was now filled once more. My son had returned, not as the boy I had lost, but as a man shaped by hardship and time. With him, he brought the warmth of long-lost love, the light of hope rekindled, and the unspoken promise that the bonds of family, no matter how frayed by time and sorrow, could be mended. Though the past would always remain, a tapestry woven with pain and loss, the future now shimmered with possibility. And for the first time in a lifetime, I dared to embrace it. And for the first time in decades, I allowed my heart to embrace the fragile, yet undeniable hope that perhaps, just perhaps, everything could find its way back to a semblance of peace once more.